Now, it is my pleasure to introduce our main speaker for tonight, Rikki M from Studio City, California.
Thank you so much. All right, get situated. Okay, I'm small. Hi, my name's Rikki and I'm an alcoholic. Hi, thank you so much for having me here. And I want to thank Patrick for inviting me, and Chris and everyone in the car today for picking me up from the airport. I got a text from Patrick when I was at the inn, and he's like, I've heard you've already made a lot of friends here, essentially. And I'm like, yeah, it was instant. As soon as I got in the car. And that's how it is, you know. I have a job where I don't get to go to work with our people every day. And so I love going to my home group or going to be with us at night. It just feels like my shoulders drop in a different way being around our people. And we're so lucky. You know, when I found Alcoholics Anonymous, I found my people. And I'm so glad to be here. Thank you so much, Brody, for that wonderful talk. I was sitting there and I was like, oh, I like Brody's sponsor. I too call it a relationship inventory because I'm from the South and sex is a red word. And so it just makes me feel more ladylike. I mean, and let's be real too. Like, because I remember when I heard about the fourth step, I had some judgments and I was like, oh, I'm not going to do that. And no, ladies do not tell. And also, I asked I really didn't know. Like, before I had really done, and you'll hear my story, it was a couple years into sobriety before I did a real inventory like Brody was talking about. And when I heard Brody talk, I was like, Brody's done a real inventory. Like, and I get to talk on the fourth step a lot, and I have gotten to take a lot of people through it. And before I knew what it was, I was like, I have to write down everybody I've ever, oh Lord. And I was like, I asked myself, I was like, what if I don't remember their name? And my sponsor was like, that's okay, you can describe them. I was like, oh my God. And that wasn't it, you know, because and it just wasn't, right? It was contempt prior to investigation. That wasn't what it was. It was a relationship inventory. And Brody said, you said so much. You said so much. I was like, if the women I sponsor were in this room, they would have been like nodding, like their head was falling off, because it's stuff that I talk about all the time, which is, when I got to the relationship inventory, what I say about that is, how do I know who I want to be unless I know who I've been? Like, and that's me with all of the inventory. And my sponsor taught me, she said, it's not a pity party. It's a fact-finding and fact-facing process. She's like, this isn't time for you to get into this whole depressive mode of like, oh my God, aren't I the worst, right? Because that's just me like rolling in character defects. It's just looking at it and saying, okay. Right? Like, I can look the world in the eye. I can put this in black and white on paper. And until I did a thorough relationship inventory, nothing had changed in that area for me. You know, I used to talk about, because people in the program would talk about, and I will tell my story, I swear. Well, we talk about the fourth step today. I'll do whole weekends on the fourth step, so this might be a minute. But people used to talk about how their picker was broken. And I heard that as a newcomer, and a newcomer from a family where I've never seen a real relationship, wouldn't know it if it hit me on the head. And I have 1 year, 2 years, and I'm talking about like just trying out there with no tools, right? And I'm just like, I guess my picker's broken. And I used to say it like it was a life sentence. I didn't know that that's not. And that can change. And the place that started to change for me was in the relationship inventory. And I was shocked to find out. So the way that we do it in my family is at the end of each situation, we ask ourselves, was this relation selfish or not? That's directly from the book. I answered yes every single time. I didn't know. Even when I thought, and it goes back to like all this explanation in the fourth step in the big book, it talks about how it talks about selfishness, self-centeredness, that we think is the root of our trouble. I didn't realize that even when trying to be kind, even when I thought it was always boiling down to self-centeredness. And I remember too, so I'll tell you about my sponsor that I have today, and I've had her for most of my sobriety. When we read in the book, Selfishness, Self-centeredness, that we think is the root of our trouble, Tanya looked at me. I was about 2.5 years sober at the time, and I read that with her, and she said, what do you think about that? Selfishness, self-centeredness, that we think is the root of our trouble. And I said, honestly? And she said, yes. I said, well, I'm offended, Tanya. And Tanya likes to laugh at me. She snorts when she laughs, so it's extra entertaining. And so she starts snort laughing at me, and she said, why are you offended, princess? And I said, Tanya, I'm not selfish. I give things to people all of the time. And she was like, oh, because I think she did this move because that part in the big book immediately precedes the fourth step inventory, where I start to find out exactly how selfish I am. And it's a trip. And I'll tell you what, I'm self-centered today in ways that I won't even see for another 5 years, and I'm here for it. I'm here for it because I thought that comfort in my own skin and freedom and all of these things and destruction of self-centeredness, I thought it was a destination. I thought I would arrive there one day. I didn't know that it's a journey. Even though y'all told me that when I got here, they said it's like peeling the onion. And I was like, I have to cook? Like, they said more will be revealed. And I was like, is there a magic show? Like, okay, Merlin, like, right? I was so confused as a newcomer. If you're new to Alcoholics Anonymous, welcome. We will say some weird things. And what they were trying to tell me was that would happen, that it was a destination, that I would find out more. They also said to me when I was new, if I'm not growing, I'm going. And I liked that, right? They said I was either walking away from or I was sliding back toward my next strength. And so I always want to be on the growing train. I want to 5 years from now, look back at me at 19 years sober and be like, wow, so much has changed. You know, I'm here for that, and it's so cool. So I'll tell you my story. That's what we're doing here. So again, my name's Rikki. I'm from Studio City, California. I'm really excited to be in Denver. I thought I had never been to Denver, and my dad was like, yes, you have, when you were a small child. But I don't remember it, so I'm very glad to be here. My sobriety date is April 21st of 2006. So on Monday, I turned 19 years sober. And thank you, and happy birthday to my other friends celebrating birthdays this week. There's a whole bunch of us here tonight that are celebrating birthdays, and something about, I didn't know that 19 was gonna feel the way that it does. I thought, oh my God, 19's cool, but I can't wait for 20. Because here's the thing too. So I was really pumped for 15. I've been planning my quinceañera since I was 10. I was like, everybody in my home group knew I was having a quinceañera when I turned 15. My friend Jorge that I got sober with, he was gonna choreograph it. And all of my sponsees, they were like, can we wear gowns? I was like, everyone can wear a gown. And I was so excited. Well, guess what? I turned 15 in 2021. We were still on lockdown. And so, I know. And so I had a little sweet 16 party, but it's okay. When that happened, I was like, you know what? I'm just holding out for 20. I'm going to have a big party at 20 with gowns. So I kind of thought like 19, that's the year before 20, but there's something about 19 that has really struck my heart. This week, I have just been overwhelmed with gratitude for what has taken place in my life. And the woman that stands in front of you is unrecognizable if you compare me to the woman that walked in here 19 years ago, the little girl that walked in here 19 years ago, and I'll tell you my story and you'll know what I'm talking about. So I come from a long line of alcoholics. I have my grandfather's big book that was passed down to my dad, that was passed down to me. It's our family heirloom. It's the only one I've ever seen, right? Like, I'm sure that some people in here have lamps, war medals, whatever. Not the Maynard family. We have a big book. And I'm the current keeper of the family heirloom. I'm very proud of it. So I was probably going to make my way here at some point, right? And I'm from the south of the United States, not California. So I was born in Tennessee, and then I lived in Alabama and Arkansas before I came here. And I'm actually surprised that I don't sound more country right now, because I spent the entire plane ride here next to someone from Little Rock. And I was sitting there talking to him, and I was like, well, there goes my California accent, because it got straight up hillbilly on the plane. And we were just talking, because that's how it is, right? My accent comes back in about 12 seconds when I talk to someone from the South. And my first memories are in Little Rock, Arkansas. At 4, 5, and 6 years old, my parents had split up when I was like 2. And my dad had moved out to some place called California. I didn't know what it was. And we're in Little Rock. And I used to climb up on this ladder, because I was short back then too, and to get into the freezer. And I didn't know what I was doing, but I would pull these bottles out of the freezer and I would pour them down the drain. And I didn't know what they were. I now know that they were vodka. But I would pour them down the drain because I just didn't want my mom to drink them anymore. And as a little girl, I was this smart kid. I really thought, let me remove the problem. And if I can just get rid of this stuff, maybe it'll be a little bit safer for us in this place. And I remember doing that, and I used to hide in this closet. I like a good closet or a bathroom. That's where I really like to hang out. And later I would live there to get loaded too. But at 4, 5, and 6 years old, that's when I first found my way to the closet. And I liked it because it was safe in there, you know. And my mom was very sick, and she would pass out with cigarettes every night, and I would wait up and I would watch through the slats of this little closet so that I could put out the cigarettes so she didn't burn down our house. And she had a lot of boyfriends that would beat her up, and all sorts of scary stuff that was going on in Arkansas. What I want to tell you about my mom, which is more important than all of that, is that my mom was the most wonderful woman in the entire world. The way I describe it is, for me, as a woman with alcoholism, is that it's not that I don't love you, and it's not that I don't care, and it's not that I want to hurt you. It's that this thing is a power greater than me. And if I could choose you, I would. I really would. And I've always known that on a deep level. I know my mom wanted me. I know my mom wanted to choose me. See, I went on in life to want all these big things. I wanted education. I wanted university. I wanted a career. I wanted all these things. I don't remember my mom wanting any of that. Like, my mom was a simple Southern woman. She wanted to raise children. She wanted her 2 little blonde baby girls. And I know I was everything she wanted in this world, and I know if she could choose me, she would. So I eventually made it out to California, and I never really knew how. So I was just telling this story on the way here, and I never really knew how I made it to California. And when I was young, people would tell me that I came out there to go to Disneyland, and I never left. And if we become Facebook friends after tonight, you will see that checks out, because I'm at Disneyland all the time. Like, I love it there. And so that story's always been told to me, and I'm like, yeah, okay, cool. So I was, last year I was with my dad, and we were talking, and I said, Dad, is it true that I came to Los Angeles to go to Disneyland and I never left? And he said, well, yeah, that's kind of true. And now that I'm older, he tells me what's going on. I said, well, what happened? And he said, actually, you were here visiting, going to Disneyland, and it was you that told me what was going on in the South. And I'm the baby of the kids in the family. And apparently at 5, 6 years old, I was out in Los Angeles going to Disneyland, and I pulled my dad aside in the hallway. And I said, Dad, would it be okay if we stayed here with you? And he said, baby, what's going on? And I said, well, we don't always eat, and we don't always go to school, and it's really nice here. Could we please stay? And the next thing that happened, and now I just found this out a year ago, right? I'm 42 years old today, so I was 41 and 18 years sober when I found out. And I guess the next thing that happened is my dad called my mom, and he said, Angie, I think it would be better if the girl stayed here with me. And my mom said, yeah, I think that would be a good idea. And my mom loved me enough to let me go. And it's the only reason I went to school and that I had clean clothes to wear and a safe house to sleep in. And my mom would come out and visit her 2 little baby girls, and I watched her get sicker and sicker. And when I was 11 years old, she died of cirrhosis of the liver. And the reason I tell you about all this, is when I was 11 and she died, I vowed that I was never, ever going to drink. And I hated alcohol, and I wanted nothing to do with it. And when it would touch my hands, I would have to wash my hands. And now I got to tell you something else about the South that's actually a little more funny than that story. So people that know me in Los Angeles, they find out I'm from the South, and I haven't lived there for a long time, so you don't hear the accent all the time, right? And they're like, oh my God, were you a debutante in the South? Right? I love that question. I love that question for so many reasons, man. Okay, number one, that is a testament to the power of Alcoholics Anonymous. Because let me promise you this, that little train wreck that sauntered in here 19 years ago in a dirty miniskirt into Alcoholics Anonymous, the first question that crowded into your mind wasn't, were you part of a high society organization that teaches manners? That's not what you thought when you met me. The old timers were like, sweetheart, do you need a hamburger? That was about it, right? So number one, off the bat, incredible advertisement for Alcoholics Anonymous. And number two, I love when people say that to me because I like to answer with the truth. When what I say is, no, honey, I was a hillbilly. We were poor. And so I'm from a poor hillbilly Southern family. And so when all this happened and I moved out to California, like the Beverly Hillbillies, I moved into this big house in Burbank, California. And it was just wild to me. I was talking to the man on the plane today from Little Rock, and we were talking about it. And I was talking to his wife, too, that was sitting behind me. And she was like, how was that for you moving to Los Angeles? I was like, man, I was like a fish out of water. My coolest piece of clothing was like a jean jacket. And I went to school in Burbank, California, a little hillbilly. And I just loved it. And but I knew in being from this poor Southern family and sort of watching all this and watching what happened with my mom, as a little girl, I decided I was going to live a different life. And I was born in the early 80s, right? And so they used to put us in front of the television. It was called babysitting back then. And I would watch all these shows that I probably wasn't supposed to watch. And they had all these fancy women on there. And it looked so different from what I knew life to look like. And I wanted what these women had. They were doctors and lawyers and business owners. And I watched these women, and being from where I was from, as a little girl, I didn't understand alcoholism. And I just thought, I'm not going to let that happen to me. And if I can get an education and a bank account, nobody can hit me and I'm not going to die. And so that was my life plan. And so when my mom died when I was 11, I set out to live this great big life that I felt like she never got to live. I hated alcohol. I didn't want anything to do with it. I felt like it killed my mom, and I became phobic of it. I set out to live this great big life. I was the first person in our entire family to go to college when I was 18 years old. Now, I'm not from a normal family, as you have heard. Is anyone in here from a normal family? There are some. Thank you. Okay, good. I got to tell you, one of the girls I got sober with, she says the only thing wrong with her family is that she was in it. And it's absolutely true. I feel like some people in this room have been on the earth long enough to know who June and Ward Cleaver are. Like, those are her parents. Like, she's from this perfect family. And I love my family too. They just like to get drunk. And so I'm not from a normal family. And let me tell you this too. So my dad, who raised me, he looks just like Rod Stewart. And if you don't know who Rod Stewart is, if you're young, I think your parents have failed you. But he is a rocker with a very cool haircut. My dad has that haircut tonight. Right now. He dropped me off at the airport this morning, and he had this haircut. And so picture this, right? I'm going to college at 18 years old, not from a normal family. Rod Stewart's driving me up to San Francisco where I'm going to college. And we get there. Now, I imagine in a normal family, you can tell me after the meeting, they say something normal to their children when they're dropping them off at college, right? Like, I'm so proud of you. Good job, kid. We'll see you at Thanksgiving. Nope. Not Rod Stewart. My dad looked super freaked out when I'm like unpacking to go into college. And I was like, Dad, are you okay? And he leans in and he says, just run and don't look back. That was his parting advice to me. And I was like, Dad, why are you being weird? And what I realized he meant was a couple things. Like, number one, I'm from alcoholics everywhere in the family. Like, both grandparents, both parents, everybody's alcoholic. And my dad later went on to be a successful businessman, very high-functioning alcoholic. But I think he looked at his kid and was like, we're not really sure how this happened, right? But like, just run. Just run as fast as you can. And the other thing, in his sweet heart, my dad just thought, go be everything that you can be. You know, and for me, when he said that, I already knew you didn't have to tell me to run, because that's how I got through life. The book talks about self-propulsion, and that was how I operated. If I can just run fast enough, I can outrun where I came from. Bill talks about it in Bill's story in the big book. He says, I'd prove to the world I was important. And that was my MO. And I got up to college. I was a straight A student. I worked really hard. I was the head of all these organizations on campus. And maybe it's the Southern in me. It's like in our blood to make everything look good on the outside. But I was dying on the inside. And I always describe, like, you know how a duck looks super peaceful gliding across the water, but underneath their feet are like this? That was like how I operated. That was a Tuesday, you know? Or like in the Indiana Jones where the big ball's rolling behind him and he's just like running. That's me to like back then. That was every day. And you didn't have to invite me to run. I was just running. Junior year of college, and I had all these big plans, right? Straight A student. I wanted to go to law school after college because if I can get an education and a bank account, nobody can hit me and I'm not going to die. And junior year of college, I'm home in Los Angeles for Christmas break, and I was out with some friends from high school. And I said, you know what? I think I'm going to drink tonight. And that, to me, early in sobriety, sounded so crazy, right? Knowing everything I know, why would I ever think, and why would I ever make that decision? But as the years have gone on, it actually makes sense, because even though I had watched alcoholism, I didn't understand it as the big book describes it. I thought it was a question of willpower. And if it's a question of willpower, I've got it covered, because don't you know who I am? I'm this kid. I go to this school. I get these grades. And up until that point in life, I actually kind of understand where my mind was going. Everything that had tried to break me up until that point had failed. So why was this liquid in the bottle going to be any different, is what I thought, you know? Obviously, I was wrong. But that's what I thought at the time, right? And I had this half a drink in Los Angeles. I got back up to school, and I went from that half a drink to drunk every night almost immediately. Do you guys remember after school specials? If you were too drunk to watch them, this is what they were. They were like these TV movies. They're most like a Lifetime movie today. That's what my drinking looked like. That's the best way to describe it. It was like, oh, sweet little sorority girl tries alcohol. Cut to 6 months later, she's a crack whore. Dun, dun, dun. Right? Like, that's how those movies went. That was the cadence with which I drank. I wasn't one... I don't know about y'all, but I'm not a high-functioning alcoholic. I've never had the desire to be. I have zero desire to function whatsoever. I don't want to go to your classes. I don't want to eat your food. I don't want to take your showers. Like, I don't want to do anything that requires me to function like a normal human being. And it's not long before I really sink into this life, like a couple months. But for the first few months of my drinking, I still had friends. It wasn't long. And so I remember... This is the thing, too. So some years ago, I was out to eat with one of my college roommates, and we were having an amends conversation. And she said something really sweet to me. She said, you know, it must have been really hard for you starting to drink in college. And I said, what do you mean? That's really nice, but what do you mean? And she said, because we were all drinking large amounts of alcohol, and you had alcoholism and we didn't. And I thought that was really sweet, and that's the reality, right? The big book does a beautiful job. If you haven't figured it out yet, I'm a big book enthusiast because I feel like it sounds more fairy-like than a big book thumper. That sounds so aggressive. And my sponsor, she'll tell you she's a big book thumper. She actually is. I watch her hit it sometimes. I tell her too, I'm like, yo, T, you just literally hit the book. She's like, I did, didn't I? I'm like, yes, I did. I love the big book. The big book does a great job of just explaining the disease of alcoholism that I was experiencing, but I didn't know it. And so when my college roommate said this, it absolutely makes sense. This is the thing. You can put me on a bar stool next to 6 other girls. We can drink the same amount of alcohol shot for shot. I may have alcoholism, they may not. I don't know it. Something different is happening to me when I take it than is happening to these other girls. And so at first, but people saw something different in the way that I drank immediately in those first weeks, those first months. And I was offended. Right? They were like, oh, you have a problem. I was like, bro, I literally just drank the same amount as you. I don't know what you mean. But they saw something different. Something different happens to me. And I start to realize a little while in there that I'm bodily and mentally different from my fellows, but I don't know it. Because I am described in the big book to a T. This is happening when I ingest it. The other thing I have is I have what the book calls a spiritual malady, which is just a fancy way of saying a spiritual sickness, which is why when I found alcohol, it felt like it answered a question that had been burning inside of me my entire life, because it did. I have alcoholism, and alcoholism demands treatment. I have alcoholism today, and alcoholism demands treatment today. I can either treat it with alcohol in any form at all, whatever rainbow you wrote in here on, right? Or I can treat it with a 12-step solution. I don't know anything about a 12-step solution yet. I've just found alcohol, which is why it feels like it fixes something inside of me. And when I found it, I felt like I grew into the skin that surrounded my body. And I felt like that, like I could breathe for the first time. The other thing that I have is this, what the book talks about is an obsession of the mind. And that's where I start to realize that I'm bodily and mentally different from my fellows. And back when I still had friends, we went out and we were not loaded yet, right? And so picture this, right? We're like 20 years old. It's cold in San Francisco, but we opt for mini skirts still. And so we're on like a street corner. Now, I got sober before Uber, which meant that you had to call a taxi and like just wait there on a hope and a prayer that somebody was going to pick you up in a mini skirt in the cold. And so I'm standing here with these girls, and we're going to go get loaded. And we're making phone calls, seeing where we can get in, right? It's not working out. And do you know what these 2 little girls said to me? They said, oh, well, I guess we'll just go home. You can tell why I didn't have friends for long. Because when that happens, this is the thing, I have the obsession of the mind. I can taste it in my mouth before I get loaded. I'm loaded. The train has already left the station before I even find it. There's something different in me. I am going to go. And so that's the thing. I remember when these girls said that, I was like, I guess I'll see you guys later, right? Like, that's what I do, and I don't understand. So I'm bodily and mentally different from my fellows. I get back to our sorority apartment, and they formed a circle in the living room just a little while into my drinking. I don't know if you guys have ever had a circle. But what they sometimes are interventions. Mine was you need to pack tonight and go, which is fine for me because I don't need you anyway, right? And so I move into this university apartment by myself, essentially, and it has a bathroom attached, which is great, closets and bathrooms. That's where I like to hang out. And so I move into the bathroom, and I spend my second semester of my senior year in the bathroom. I'm 21 units shy of a college degree, and this is what happened. So did anyone else get loaded in the bathroom? I know you did, Brody. Okay, anyone else? Brody's my closet and bathroom homie, okay? So here's why I did it. You can lock the door, which is so good. And then I don't remember windows in this bathroom, which is great. So I would light all these candles and set my mood lighting. And then I moved a boombox in there, which is great. If you don't know what a boombox is, if you're really young, that's a radio or like a stereo. And so I moved a boombox in there because I had years of feelings that I needed to express through song. And And so I spent my senior year in the bathroom singing the best slow jams of the late 90s and early 2000s into a wine bottle. And it was like me and Boys to Men, End of the Road, singing into a wine bottle, crying, right? I'm attractive. And I'm really sad to report to you, Alcoholics Anonymous, that this is when alcohol was working for me. This is when it looked good, right? And sometimes I would leave this bathroom, not to go to class, that was too much, but I would leave because there was a liquor store at the bottom of this huge staircase, which is like where I did my shopping. And so I would leave to go to this liquor store, and if you knew me back then, you were alarmed because the girl that you saw was a little different from the one that used to tutor you. And so people, and this is just like, I'm talking like a few months, right? And so people would stop me because they're good people, and they would be like, hey, are you okay? And I was drunk, so I was like, I don't know what you're talking about, dude. And they're like, well, you used to tutor me, and you used to shower. Are you okay? And I was raised well, and so I was like, thank you so much for your concern. And what I thought was, I'll stop when I want to, and that day's not today. Because I thought that I had that power. I don't know that I don't have that power, right? What I felt inside, though, what the book says is that we often suspect that we're down for the count. And I went down this staircase one day to go to the liquor store. If I had known it was the day I was supposed to be graduating college, I would have never left that bathroom. And I went down 21 units shy of a college degree, and I remember seeing all these kids I had tutored for years in their caps and gowns coming up the stairs with their families. And I froze on that staircase. I can still see it like it was yesterday. And I turned in slow motion, and I watched them go up. And I didn't think in that moment, I'll stop when I want to, and that day's not today. I felt what the book talks about. I knew this thing had me because I watched them go up the stairs, and I thought, there goes my life. I knew I was done. I knew I would never have it. I knew I was gone, and my next thought was, I guess I am my mother's daughter. And what do I do with those feelings, right? When all my hopes and dreams are crashing down around me, when people tell me to stop calling, when they form circles in the living room and they say, you can't live here anymore, you can't be here, you need to go. Right? All of this stuff is happening all the time, and what do I do with those feelings? I try to pour more on to make it go away. Because if I can just get drunk enough, I don't have to feel this, and maybe I can sleep tonight. And that's the best I've got. And so I move home to Los Angeles, again, on one level, thinking I'll exert my willpower, but knowing in my heart of hearts that it's not going to happen. I'm living in different parts of California in dirty clothes on people's couches because that's the best I've got. I'm pretty sure that my dad went to an Al-Anon meeting in 2005. Here's why I suspect it. So I had one of those pay-as-you-go cell phones, and he left a message on there, and it was different because I'm classy, right? I had a pay-as-you-go cell phone. I'm not somebody you give an account to when I'm drunk, right? Like, I did not have a bank account. I didn't have a cell phone account. I had a pouch. I still have the pouch. I had a pouch that I would carry money around in when I had it, which was not often. And I had this pay-as-you-go cell phone, and he left a message on it, and he said, when you're ready to get sober, we've arranged a bed for you at a treatment center. Click. Like, it didn't say, come home, let us know if you need money, are you alive, right? It just said, if you don't want to die, we've set something up for you. And I was 22 years old, and I didn't understand. This was just a couple months after that staircase in San Francisco on the day I was supposed to be graduating. And I heard this message, and I needed a nap, and I needed to wash my clothes. And so I was like, I guess I'll go home. This is my favorite thing, too. I went home, and I went to tour the treatment center to see if it was good enough for me. I can't even afford a hamburger, but I have standards. And I don't really know what's going on. I'm not all there. And so I go look at this place, and I think I'm going back to school. And so I look at this place, and I was like, I guess I'll go here. But I think I'm going back to school. I'm 22 years old, and I go home to my parents' house, and I pack up my college bedspread, which is pink, with my matching pink rug and my pink suitcase, and I go to rehab. And so what you do when you get to college, as you guys know, is that you decorate your dorm room. And so I got to my dorm room, and And so I start decorating. I put out the bedspread and the rug, and I pin my sorority letters on the cork board, and I'm decorating this whole room. And imagine this, too. It's not one of those bougie treatment centers, right? This is like bottom of the barrel, and I'm decorating. And these girls start coming by my room. This is great for me because I was an orientation leader in college, and I'm in full flight from reality, so I think I'm still at school. And these girls start coming by, and I'm so excited. I love making friends. And I was like, hi, welcome to my room. And they start laughing, right? And I'm like, right, it's fun here. And and I don't know that they're laughing at me because most of them have just paroled from prison. And they're like, what are you? I didn't know they gave me a name. They called me Rehab Barbie. And don't worry, though, but don't feel bad for me because I wore them down. And that's how I make friends. If you don't like me tonight, you will. I'll wear you down. So I wore them all down. I played spades and charades, and I was pretty sure you guys would elect me valedictorian of Alcoholics Anonymous soon. In full flight from reality, I would come to your meetings. This has actually been on my heart lately. So I've grown up in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous, and I actually didn't get sober this time in 2005. What I did was I would come to your meetings and I would bring a notebook because I wasn't all there and I thought I was still in school. And I would take notes. I don't know what I was writing. I would scribble in this notebook. And I was a sad, scared little girl and I didn't know what was going on. Nobody in Alcoholics Anonymous was ever mean to me. If you ask any of the women that I sponsor, they'll tell you one of my favorite things to say is, please let me be the hand of AA, not the fist. I always want to be the hand of AA and welcome you into Alcoholics Anonymous. You will never hear me yelling at a newcomer, what are you? Who are you? Oh my God, if somebody had yelled that at me, I would have been like, I don't know. I don't know what I am or who I am or how I'm supposed to identify or what I'm supposed to do here. And they didn't do that to me. I got really lucky. People said, I have a seat for you. They remembered my name. They said, sweetheart, it's good to see you. They followed the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. Nowhere in the big book, I swear I know it. The people that have raised me have made sure I know it like the back of my hand. It doesn't say berate the newcomer. It doesn't say be mean to the newcomer. It says that we walk shoulder to shoulder. It's all about love. There's no hierarchy. There's no I'm better than you because there's no line your sponsees up like ducklings, all right? Like there's nothing like that in the big book. It's all about love and harmonious action. All the words are unifying. And the people, for whatever reason, God knew, I didn't need people to be mean to me. I was mean enough to myself. I hated myself when I got here. I just needed people to say, hi, sweetheart, it's good to see you. We have a seat for you. Because what happened, I didn't stay sober that time. You guys didn't elect me valedictorian, which was weird. And from March of 2005 to April of 2006, what happened is that it got really, really bad. Now, if you haven't figured it out yet, my father is my hero. That man is my whole heart. You couldn't pay me all the money in the world to hurt him, but what it looks like in our family is that unfortunately, when I'm drunk, it's the only thing that I can do. And so what it looks like in our home is I leave that man up for weeks and months at a time, calling hospitals and jails to figure out if his little girl is dead or alive every single night. They gave me a car to drive when I turned 16, and so I would leave it abandoned in parts of town with dust and tickets piling up on it, so my father would get a phone call from the police. Or he'd find my car, and again, he doesn't know if his little girl is dead or alive, or if she's being violated somewhere or what's happening. When I run out of places to sleep, because that happens, I show back up at their house months later, withered, dirty, and I ask if I can stay there again. And this happens over and over again. And when my dad sees me, my dad starts crying. And this is a big deal, you guys. I'm the one in the family that made it out. I'm the one that was supposed to be all these things. I was his kid that was going to be a lawyer. And here I am. And this is what I'm doing. And I can't, I'm breaking this man's heart. And I show back up and he starts crying. He says, honey, I'm so glad that you're okay. I said, I know, Dad, I promise that I'll never do it again. And I mean it. I mean it with everything in me, because if I could choose you, I would. If I could choose my father, I would. I don't want to sleep away from my home at Christmas. I don't want to do the things I'm doing. The best way I can describe that life that I lived is, how do you think a pretty little girl stays on the streets week after week and month after month with places to sleep and things to do and things to eat, right? I'm doing anything I can to stay out in this lifestyle, and I hate myself. And I'm living. In our family, we tear through the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, line by line, word by word, page by page. One of the things I've always looked up that I've never had to is pitiful and incomprehensible demoralization, because it's the only thing I knew before I came back to you on April 21st of 2006. I showed back up at my family's house somewhere around February of 2006, and I asked to stay there again. And my dad came into my room in April, and he said, "What are you going to do, because you can't do this?" Because I knew it wasn't long before they told me I couldn't stay there anymore, because they were already locking the doors. I'm not safe to leave in your house when I'm drunk. And I said, I guess I'll go back to that place. I didn't come to Alcoholics Anonymous because I thought I was going to get sober. I'll never forget the hopelessness that was in my gut on April 21st of 2006. I was 23 years old, about to turn 24. I wasn't actively trying to die, but my dad will tell you that I was weeks away from physically dying. And what I can tell you is that I had been dead inside for a really long time. And I didn't come here because I thought that I was going to build a life in Alcoholics Anonymous and be standing in front of you as a sober woman of 19 years. I didn't have any thought that that would ever happen. I came here because I didn't have anywhere else to go, and it was just one more place to go sleep. And I stood in this room on April 21st, and I stared blankly up at this TV screen, and everything human inside of me had been ripped out, and I was empty, and I was broken, and I was sad, and I was scared. And that's what I brought you. And we do really well with that here in Alcoholics Anonymous. And I felt so ashamed. Back then, I don't usually talk about this, but back then there was that song by Maroon 5 on the radio, and it was See the Girl with the Broken Smile. And if you know me today, you know that is not me, right? Like, this smile is not broken, right? I couldn't even look you in the eye because I was so ashamed. I would just stare at the ground. And I met people in Alcoholics Anonymous, and they had been where I had been, and their lives were different and better. And they started to tell me their stories. I was so ashamed and so embarrassed, and I felt like if you knew what I had been living in and what I had been doing, that you wouldn't want me either. I thought I was the only person that had ever been and done all those things. And if you knew my story, you wouldn't want me in Alcoholics Anonymous either. They said to me, "Honey, you're not a bad person, you're a sick person, and we get well here in Alcoholics Anonymous." And I could understand that. They told me they had been where I had been, and their lives were different and better. They said to me when I was new, I didn't understand it at first when I was new, but they said to me when I was new, the most important thing I will say tonight, and the most important thing I will say ever in my life. If you're new here with us tonight, and you were thinking about dinner through this whole talk, please just hear me right now. They said, we have a way out if you want it, and it's outlined in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. Equally as important, if you're not new here tonight and you feel messed up inside, I want to stand next to you shoulder to shoulder and take your hand and let you know that we have a way out if you want it, and it's outlined in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I don't say that out of some sort of theory or some sort of big book thumperness. I say that from my own personal experience. I think that it's popular in Alcoholics Anonymous because it's just how we learn to tell stories from when we were children, that they have a beginning, middle, and an end, right? Oh my God, I was a train wreck when I was drunk, and then I got sober, and my life is rainbows, butterflies, unicorns, woo, right? That's actually true. Like, I actually see the world in rainbows, butterflies, and unicorns most of the time. However, I've grown up in Alcoholics Anonymous, and sometimes that growing up has not been comfortable. If you have come here and every day of your life has been perfect and you've been here for a really long time, that is so good. Like, I love that. I really do. I love that for you. That's just not been my experience. It's not always been pretty. And maybe because I was growing up chronologically and in sobriety at the same time, sometimes it was ugly. And I had what I like to call hills and valleys in sobriety. There were times where I was on the floor wailing for a new experience with a higher power. There were times when defects of character were being removed and they were big ones and it was uncomfortable. One of my friends talks about, I get asked about 6 and 7 a lot. I love the way one of my friends describes it. He says, when Michelangelo created the statue of David, they asked him how he created the statue of David. He said, I chipped away everything that wasn't David. And that's, to me, like how my character was built here. And sometimes it was uncomfortable. Sometimes I have gotten myself so busy doing the stuff around here that I haven't done the stuff around here inside. And I've needed a new experience, whatever it is. Sometimes I have done stuff by my own hand. Oh, man, my sponsor should get sainthood. Like, that woman raised a little troublemaker, okay? I would call her, I'd be like, yo, T. And she'd say, yes, baby. And I'd say, remember that thing that you told me not to do? And she'd start snort laughing. And she'd say, yes, baby. And I'd say, well, I did it, and now it's on fire. And she'd laugh so hard, and she'd be like, all right, let's put out the fire, kid. And this is great because my sponsor sponsors out of the big book, not just the 12 steps, but out of page 18. What page 18 says is that we have no attitude of holier than thou. Nothing whatever except the sincere desire to be helpful. There are no fees to pay, no axes to grind, no people to please, no lectures to be endured. My sponsor never beat me. She never put me in a corner and told me I was the worst alcoholic that ever was. She's always loved me. All these years, that woman has always made it okay for me to tell the truth. Because when I was new here, they said something else. And this has saved my life all these years. They said, we tell the truth, honey, through the good, the bad, the indifferent. No matter what, we tell the truth. If you lie, you're going to get loaded. And I've been able to tell the truth all the time. Because sometimes the truth has been, I don't feel it today. I don't feel it. I feel disconnected from God. At one time, I was working 3 jobs, going to school at night, going to AA full time. I was doing the stuff, but I was living in the bedevilments, right? Like whatever my experience is, I can come to the table. Back to being new, though, they said, we have a way out if you want it. They also said, if you want what we have, do what we do. I was like, I don't know what that means. And they said, well, honey, do you want what you have? And I said, no, ma'am. No, ma'am. The trash bag full of clothes? No. And I said, no, ma'am. And they said, then do what we do. I said, okay. And they told me to get a sponsor, and so I did. They told me to work the 12 steps with that sponsor, so I did. They told me to pray, so I did. They told me to get commitment, so I did, and to get in the middle of Alcoholics Anonymous, and so I did. And I did all this stuff because I'm a good joiner, right? Like monkey see, monkey do. And like I would do this stuff and I would pray. Didn't know how, but I would go home and I would pray. And you guys gave me prayers, which was helpful. But they felt like nursery rhymes to me. Now, yeah, as you can imagine, okay, I was raised in a rock and roll family. Now, by the way, just to clarify, Rod Stewart is not actually my father, but if we call my father Daryl tonight and ask him, are you Rod Stewart? He'll probably say yes. And so he's just great, right? And so like my dad is a rocker, and I think our religion was the Rolling Stones growing up. So I didn't go to church or anything, and I didn't know how to pray, but I was told to, so I did, and I wanted to. I wanted what you had. And you guys would share in meetings, and I wanted what you had. I read my first inventory at 6 months sober. I don't know what that thing said, but I read it, and I did it, and that was amazing, and I felt really good. And I got in the middle of Alcoholics Anonymous, 1 year, 2 years, 2.5 years sober. I'm your secretary. I'm your chip person. Somehow I'm some people's sponsor, and I'm in the front row of Alcoholics Anonymous, and I'm dying of alcoholism. I'm restless, irritable, and discontent. And because I was praying and I was saying these things that felt like nursery rhymes, but you guys were in meetings and you were talking about having a conscious contact with a higher power, and I didn't know what you were talking about. Because I had said these nursery rhymes to this thing that I felt like wasn't listening. And I guess we're going to tell this tonight. And I thought it hated me. People ask me why I say that. So really well-meaning people in Alcoholics Anonymous said really well-meaning things to me. And one of the things they said was, everything happens for a reason. And I'm trying to develop a concept of a higher power. I don't know I'm trying to develop one, but I'm picking all this up and I'm trying to put time together sober. And I'm smart. And so I go home and I process that. And if everything happens for a reason, then why did your God kill my mom? But I won't tell you that. And I'm in the front row of Alcoholics Anonymous, and I'm sure God hates me. And I don't know how to pray, and so I go home at night, and I get on my knees, and I'm scared. And I say, it's kind of funny. I'd be like, excuse me, sir. And I'd say these nursery rhyme prayers, and I'd be like, okay, thank you. And I didn't know what to do. I just got it all from TV and movies and stuff, and but I couldn't figure out why I didn't have what you guys talked about having. I was 2.5 years sober, and I was restless, irritable, and discontent in the front row of Alcoholics Anonymous. I would watch people in meetings, and I'd be like, I swear to God, if this guy shares one more time, I'm going to cut him in the parking lot after the meeting. I'd look at him, I'd be like, Bob, I see your hand. I swear to God, same share every week. And oh my God. And I was in a relationship that I had no business being in. Some people ask me why I say that. Because I had no idea how to love myself, so I had absolutely no idea how to love another human being, but I was trying. And I had years of abandonment issues that needed to be unpacked, and a lot of inventory and a lot of therapy that had never been touched. And I was throwing them up on another human being. And I would scream in the bathroom of our apartment, and I was screaming inside. I suspected that I was probably about to drink. I can tell you today that I know for sure I was. There's a lot of places in the book that tell me when I'm going to drink, and the one I'm thinking about right now is in the 4th step of the big book, and it says, I harbor resentment. I like to think of that like harboring a fugitive, right? Like I give it water, I nurse it. And I couldn't access anger, and I was taught that resentment means to refeel anything I'm refeeling, right? I harbor resentment. The next thing that happens is I shut myself off from the sunlight of the Spirit, then the insanity returns, and then I drink. It doesn't say I drink and the insanity returns. It says the insanity returns and then I drink. And by this time, insanity had not only returned, it had moved in and bought property, right? I'm crazy all day. And so I asked for help. And I would gather in hallways of churches, and I asked old timers for help, long timers, and I said, what do I do? This is what's going on inside of me. I need help. And I was told that it sounded like run-of-the-mill alcoholism, and I might want to go through the 12 steps again. And so I got the sponsor at 2.5 years sober that I have today. And Tanya had a rubber band holding her big book together. And I asked her all my questions. And our book talks about a man or a woman with a real answer. And Tanya, I just knew this woman had me. She looked me dead in the eye. And I said, how do you get a conscious contact with a higher power? And what is it? And how do I get to be comfortable in my own skin? And what is that? Because people talk about having that, and I don't have it. And how do I stop screaming inside and screaming in the bathroom of my apartment because I don't want to drink and I don't want to die? And she said, you know how you get all that stuff, baby? She didn't even flinch. She just looked right at me, and I said, how? She said, line by line, word by word, page by page. I'm going to take you through the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, baby. When it says write, we're going to write. When it says pray, we're going to pray. She said, you better get a God, baby, because I'm going to fail you. And it needs to be bigger than the one that you have now. I said, you're going to fail me? Are you okay? I thought she needed a sponsor. I was like, oh my God, what did I do? And she started laughing, and she said, no, baby, I'm a human power. I can't be your higher power, but my entire job as your sponsor is to introduce you to a power greater than yourself that can solve all your problems. And that's the main purpose of this book. And she said, you better pay attention, little girl. I said, yes, ma'am. She said, don't waste my time. I'm teaching the teacher. I'm training the sponsor. If there's something in this book that you don't understand, I need to know, because you're going to spend the rest of your life teaching this book to other women, and it's going to save your life for the rest of your life. I didn't know that Tanya was literally dropping the keys to the kingdom in my lap in that moment. The best way to describe it, one of my favorite speakers is Bill C., and he says, I don't believe you have to give it away to keep it. I believe you have to give it away to even get it. And that has undoubtedly been my experience in Alcoholics Anonymous. From that moment today, I sponsor women that sponsor women that sponsor women that sponsor women across the country. And I can tell you that the women I sponsor for sure know how to sponsor out of the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. I get to stand up at their weddings and their graduations, and these are the most important moments of my entire life. I graduated college, I did all those things, and I tell you what, in a couple weeks I'm gonna stand up. I have 2 weddings I'm in this year of women that I sponsor, and these women are magnificent. Last summer I got to be there when one of them found her wedding dress. And I've known this young lady for 7 years, and I watched her come in a midriff and jeans and braids and a bandana tied up on her head. And I looked at this glorious, beautiful woman as they put a wedding veil on her and a wedding gown, and I just lost it. I stood there with her mother and all of her friends, and I watched this gorgeous, beautiful woman that you guys built, this beautiful woman. And I just thought, man, God is magnificent. This is what happens because she does the work. This week has been crazy. All the women that I sponsor, people have been stopping by and coming and leaving gifts on my doorstep and writing beautiful cards. And that's all God. That's all because I sat down with Tanya at this coffee shop, and from that moment, Alcoholics Anonymous really started to raise me. Tanya over-delivered on every single promise she made to me that night with that rubber band that holds her big book together. As she took me through the 12 steps, everything inside of me changed. And it really did. And I remember it sounded like so much work, right? When it would be oh, the only thing you have to change is everything. I was like, that sounds like one of my character defects is laziness. And even though I'm a really hard worker, I don't want to be some days. And I was like, oh God, it sounds like a lot of work. And she said, don't worry, it's going to happen as we turn the pages. And I was like, okay, because it talks about a psychic change, right? A psychic change is to replace my mind with another. And I remember she asked me, what do you think about that? I was like, bro, that sounds like a lot of work. And she was like, don't worry, it's literally just going to happen as we turn the pages. What I want to tell you is about the ninth step. We talked about the fourth step a lot, which I love. So I've made amends a few times in the program. And my biggest one was to my father. I terrorized that man. And I remember on April 21st of 2006, I looked in my dad's eyes and I knew I had broken something in him that I would never fix. My dad, he didn't look at me like this kid that was going to be magical and get sober. He looked at me like, I'll never say that my dad gave up on me because he wouldn't, but I remember the way he looked at me. And he had become acquainted with the fact that his kid was probably going to die really soon. And I had terrorized this man, and I broke his heart. And in my first several years of sobriety, I had a father with a broken heart. And I knew it, and I wanted it to be different, and I wanted him to know that I was different. And it came time to do like a real amends with Tanya. I had done all the inventory and all the work, and I was so excited. And we sponsor in and out of amends in our family, which means I talked to Tanya, and I'm waiting to go in, and she's like, you got this, baby. And I was like, let's go, and you guys had told your stories about amends. Now, I know the book by this point. What the book says about amends is that I don't get to have expectations of what happens on the other side. Did it? Because you guys told your stories, and now it was time for my moment. I wanted the clouds to part. I had done the work. I wanted the rainbows to shine, the clouds to part, and I had this whole picture of what was going to happen. I was so excited for it, and because I really wanted to do this with my father. And I went and sat down with my father, and I start going through the harms, and he starts making jokes. And he's like, did you forget about the time you stole my checkbook? And I was like, no, it's on here. And he was like, are you almost done? I'm hungry. And I was like, oh my God. And I was like, yes. And then I fed him because he was hungry. And then I went outside and I called Tanya. And she said, like a sponsor does, baby, how did it go? And I said, it was okay. And she said, what's wrong, sweetheart? And I start bawling. And I said, Tanya, I broke something in him that I'm never going to be able to fix. And she said, honey, you didn't break his heart over an index card. You're not going to fix it over one. I said, yes, ma'am. And she said, now starts the amends. You made an approach. Now starts the amends. I said, yes, ma'am. What do you want me to do? And she said, now you get to be a daughter to your dad. And I said, yes, ma'am. And she told me specifically what to do. And I did it. I trust this woman with everything in me, and I trust Alcoholics Anonymous, and so I started being a daughter to my dad. And I did all these things for many years, and when I was about 12 years sober, I was out at an amusement park, and I got a phone call that my dad was in the emergency room. Now, my family's never been in the hospital other than this pesky alcoholism thing. We're very healthy. And so I go to the hospital, and I get there. And now, okay, so by the way, I'm the baby of all the kids. We all live on the same street in Studio City, Moore Park Street. Come see us. It's a good time. And so I'm going, right? And I get to the hospital. I rush there, and I'm the only person in the room with my father. And I said, Dad, what's going on? And I realized really quickly that my father thinks he's going to die, and that it's a big possibility. And I said, Dad, what's going on? Where is everybody? And he says, I just called you, kid. I wanted to wait until you got here because I want you running point for the family on what's going to probably be a really tragic situation. And now that you're here, you can call the rest of the family. Sometimes amends aren't made over an index card. I knew in that moment, what I have written in my book on amends is it's a restoration, restoring the person to the position they were in before I ripped through their life to the best of my ability. And I knew in that moment that you had restored a daughter to a father. And my dad looked at me like his little girl that he trusted. And it got real scary, you guys, and I was terrified. I went outside and I called Tanya, and she said, baby, what do we need to do? Do you need to make a bedside amends? And I said, no, ma'am. I've done everything you told me to do for the last many years. And she said, all right, baby, we're going to get through this. And my dad, he didn't die that day, and he's just as ornery as ever. He lives down the street from me. And it gets to my heart because it's something we've looked at recently again. You guys gave my dad a daughter. If that's the only thing that happens, which it's not, I will spend every single day of the rest of my life trying to pay Alcoholics Anonymous back. You gave my dad a daughter, you gave my sisters a sister, you gave my friends a friend, you gave my employers an employee, and my sponsors a sponsor. Everything I value about myself, everything was built here in Alcoholics Anonymous as you chipped away everything that wasn't Rikki. The life I live today, I live really, really free and easy because of the process outlined in the big book. If you want anything that sounds like the freedom I live with, I promise you this. If you're new with us here tonight, we will give it to you. It is outlined in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, and we know how to show you how to find it. Thank you so much for having me here.